Hey everyone, with Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester, and this is the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. Today we've got a packed show with injury news, waiver wire recommendations with Sigmund Bloom of Footballguys.com, then buy, sell ideas, rest of the season rankings, and some drop recommendations thanks to the idea from one of our listeners. So Tags, besides Amari Cooper, cleaning up and becoming a GOAT overnight, how was your weekend, man?
Well, it started off pretty good with that Amari Cooper with the 210 yards, 2-touchdown performance. By the way, a little hit that I found on that is that just 37 wide receivers this year, like the entire season, have more than 210 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it obviously worked out well for Amari's case. It was good to see. All I want is people to see on national TV that Amari's a good player. Does he still have some issues to work through? Absolutely. He could have had an even bigger game had he not dropped some of the passes that he did.
Yeah.
But with that being said, Bobby, I've been massively sick, and I know you don't even know this because you and I haven't talked about it. But this entire week, I've been really, really sick, foggy upstairs, and I actually almost went to the ER last night because I had a temperature of 102 in the middle of the night. They don't know if it's like mono. They don't know if it's my thyroid jacked up. But basically, I might pass out while I'm on the mic today.
I'm sorry, man. I had mono and it was not fun. So I really hope that's not what you have. I mean, I did get to skip a lot of classes during college. That was really cool. But then, I found out I had to make them up. So that was not good.
No. Well, that's the crappy part. So I went to the immediate care this morning after kind of putting it off for an entire week. I went to immediate care and they did the blood work, but they say the mono test takes almost 5 days to come back.
No,
so
that's a lie. That's a lie. They're just putting it off.
I hope so. I don't know, because I can't live with this, because basically 4 o'clock rolls around and my body just literally shuts down and shuts off. So I don't know. I hope everything's okay. I don't know too much about it, but yeah.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I did 3 push-ups Friday morning because I think I'm probably going to lose this bet and I need to start getting in shape because Amari Cooper just went crazy. Man, this season's been nuts. I mentioned 2 weeks ago that the Jaguars were first in point differential. Well, they were just passed up by a team with the NFL's most scored points. Any idea who that is, Tags?
It is the Los Angeles Rams.
Yes, it is. Their leading receiver was a backup receiver for a terrible passing offense last year, Robert Woods. Speaking of the Jaguars, my boys like to pretend they're Leonard Fournette. And when the season started, my oldest wanted to be referred to as Blake Bortles. That's kind of changed. I didn't tell him Blake Bortles is horrible, but there's just not any excitement there anymore. So over the past few weeks, he's been calling his younger brother Blake Bortles. And on game day, they call me Jalen Ramsey and they call their mommy Calais Campbell. Anyway, my 2-year-old had an accident, pooped his pants. So my 3-year-old comes running upstairs to me screaming, Blake Bortles pooped his pants. I can't find Calais Campbell anywhere to clean it up. And, I promise I'm not making this up, but that is the Jaguars football season in a nutshell.
My God, that's awesome. That's the best. And by the way, Blake Bortles, my streaming option, cash game option in week 7 did pan out, dude. 330 yards and a touchdown. Man. And honestly, it all came in the first half. He had 280 yards and a touchdown in the first half. And then they kind of sat on the ball.
And then he stopped trying because they didn't even need to try. He was just so good. I can't believe you were brave enough to do that. I was not.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm going to sit here and tell you that I wasn't brave enough. I actually played Tyrod Taylor over him.
Okay.
I didn't go to Bortles, but I did play Bortles in some cash games though. So I didn't fade Bortles completely, but it was good to see the Colts continue to give up a massive amount of points, and now they just lost Malik Hooker for the year. But speaking of suspension, speaking of missing time, Marshawn Lynch is suspended for 1 game. And Bobby, I don't know if you saw the story on this and the fact that Marshawn Lynch, when he ran out of the field, most people assumed that it was to protect his quarterback, but no. He was actually running out to protect Marcus Peters, the cornerback who hit Derek Carr. What is going on here?
I don't know, man. I don't know. It was a late hit. The guy should have got roughed up by everyone on the Raiders. But is he a traitor to his team? Is Derek Carr going to be really mad at him now? I don't understand. I don't know if this is just a narrative so he doesn't get in as much trouble. I saw him hanging out with Marcus Peters after the game.
On the train.
Yeah, on the it's a weird story. I don't know what's going on. It doesn't really matter, though, because he's just not very good at football anymore.
Yeah, no, he hasn't looked very good. DeAndre Washington looked really good in his, replacing him. And we're going to talk about DeAndre Washington on the show today. But one other player that, Bobby, you and I have to eat some crow for is Jameis Winston. Both of us said that we wouldn't play him. And who would have thought, right? Coming off of a shoulder injury, a throwing shoulder injury, playing against the Buffalo Bills on the road, who were coming off their bye week. There were just so much to dislike about Jameis Winston. He goes and has one of his best games of the season.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can eat crow if you want, but I changed my rankings. I read some reports that looked pretty good. So I moved Jameis Winston up quite a bit ahead of expert consensus. So I liked Jameis after the show. I mean, of course, not everyone knew that, but if you looked at my rankings, you saw that Jameis was a good start.
I wasn't playing him. I told people I'd play a lot of guys over him. I would play him.
Don't get me wrong. I had a lot of crow this week, and as always, same with every single expert. Like, there's just, so many players, and you're going to get some of them wrong. But Jameis, I changed my mind on.
Yeah, but 384 yards, 3 touchdowns. Didn't see that coming. Also, obviously, we can't predict these things, but Carson Palmer, if you guys have not heard, he's got a broken arm, and they're saying it's 8 weeks or something like that. His season.
He's going to miss the season.
I think his career's done. I think he was weighing retirement before this. I just don't see any reason for him to come back. It looks like Larry Fitzgerald, his season is done. It's just part.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, like, is in terms of fantasy production, like, he's no longer going to be an every week starter in fantasy football.
Are you serious? You wouldn't start Larry Fitzgerald every single week? Look, okay, Carson Palmer was not very good, even though he threw a ton of passes. And Drew Stanton is 3 times worse than Carson Palmer, but I mean, like, Larry Fitzgerald's a top 10 receiver right now. You're saying this is going to drop him out to like number 30?
Yeah, it's the same thing that I talked about with Devontae Adams, is like people were underestimating the loss of Aaron Rodgers. And Carson Palmer, the thing is he's not really a bad quarterback. He just plays in a really bad team. And he started to get some of the pass catchers back. The offensive line there is brutal. They don't have a run game. As much as people want to say Adrian Peterson looked like the Adrian Peterson that did in New Orleans, it was one game essentially that people are basing their Peterson opinions on. And this team is not very good. The offensive line can't block. Drew Stanton, in his time that he's gotten, it's been bad. If you look at Fitzgerald over the last couple of years without Palmer, it has not been pretty. There was one game where he had 2 touchdowns, which kind of threw off the touchdown totals, but it's just no. He's in Devontae Adams territory where it's like wide receiver 3 that I'm okay with playing someone like Deshaun Jackson over on a weekly basis.
I disagree with you here, man. In fact, if people feel this way, I would just go out and trade for Larry Fitzgerald, because I think you're still getting a top 20 wide receiver. And if you can get that kind of value in the trade market, I'm all for it. I'm not saying I'm going to target him, but I'm going to feel out the owner of my league and see what he thinks about Larry Fitzgerald. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up dropped in 2 weeks if Drew Stanton continues to play horrible football, just because that's the way people do fantasy football. Like, 2 bad weeks, well, you're off my fantasy radar now.
Now let's pretend something real quick. Would you trade Larry Fitzgerald right now for Jarvis Landry?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, I changed my rest of season rankings this morning. I've got Larry Fitzgerald at number 17 and Jarvis Landry at 13, 14. He's doing great right now.
Yeah, no, that was one that's kind of like the borderline. I think that Jarvis Landry, we're going to talk about him later in our buy low, sell high segment, but it's curious. Like, and I'm with our guest Sigmund Bloom today, I'm going to ask him about his thoughts going forward on this Cardinals offense and what he thinks. I'm curious about it.
Do you think they're going to run the ball a lot more with Adrian Peterson? I mean, now that Drew Stanton's there, they can't throw the ball a record-setting number of times like they were with Palmer. Peterson's got to get 20 carries a game, right?
Well, the thing is, the reason they've been throwing so much, it's not because they necessarily want to. It's because they had to. Their defense has been horrific, man. Like, the loss of Calais Campbell up front has really, they've lost a lot of the pressure that they used to generate up front. Budda Baker, he's looked okay. But there's just, I don't know. There's just nothing on this team that stands out outside of Patrick Peterson, because Tyrann Mathieu is not the same player he used to be. They had to bench Justin Bethel, one of their starting cornerbacks this week, and that worked out because Tremont Williams is better than him. So there's just a whole lot of problems in this Cardinals team that I don't think is going anywhere in a hurry. So I honestly want no part of it. Like, when you're looking at fantasy contributors that you want on your fantasy football team, you're looking for guys that are going to be a part of a high scoring offense. They're going to be seeing high volume. It's just, I don't get that feeling with this Cardinals team that, honest to God, I think they're going to struggle to score 17 points a week.
I think you're probably right. I'd still start Adrian Peterson every single week. He's going to get 15 carries every week.
Well, the Rams, how many carries did he get against the Rams? I think it was only like 11 carries or something like that, but he didn't do anything with them. And the Rams have not really been good at stopping the run this year. So again, there are so many concerns with this. I want zero part of it. I would rather sell at a discount than wait and find out.
I think his trade value is still quite a bit higher than it should be, just because it's Adrian Peterson.
But I just want to say before we start wrapping this up for the recap, is that Dak Prescott is like the greatest of all time. He's
really good, man.
He picked up where he left off last year, and I said last week on the show that Dak is my number 2 quarterback for the rest of the season. This week obviously didn't change that with him going into San Francisco and dominating them like he has. The part that really blows my mind with Dak is he's doing it without true wide receivers outside of Dez Bryant, because Terrence Williams is awful. Jason Witten is at the tail end of his career. He moves. I have no idea how Jason Witten scores touchdowns. Like, let me just be honest about that. He was never like a phenomenal athlete. He was always a great route runner, but I have no idea how the man is still scoring. I was waiting for the Cowboys after the bye to maybe go towards Bryce Butler, giving him more of a shot. And he did play, I want to say it was a season high in snaps, but Terrence Williams still outsnapped him. So, I mean, Cole Beasley, what is he throwing to, man? It's ugly.
Nothing. Yeah, it is really ugly. I can't believe what he's doing on the ground too. Dak he's really turning into a superstar, and he's a lot of fun to watch. He's a good superstar for the game, and they need some more with all these quarterbacks getting old. Mike Wallace, Jay Cutler could miss some time, but again, minimal fantasy relevance. So, all right, so Tags, we're going to dive into the waiver wire here in just a second, but first, a word from today's sponsor, Lisa.com. When it's time for my 3-year-old to take his nap, he knows he needs to get himself a drink, take himself to the bathroom, then come give daddy a hug, then he takes himself to bed. Well, this past week, he started taking himself to my bed. I didn't tell him to do that, but it's funny because even my 3-year-old knows this new mattress from Lisa.com is the best. He never did this before I got my Lisa mattress, and I don't blame him. It really is the most comfortable bed I've ever slept on. And America agrees because Lisa was the fastest growing e-realtor in 2015 because everyone found out how comfortable their mattress was, told all their friends and family, and now you can try it for yourself because they offer everyone 100 nights risk-free and with free shipping. We've got a promo code for you. If you want to save $100 off your order, just go to lisa.com/fantasypros. That's LEESA.com/fantasypros for $100 off your mattress order. All right, well, that brings us to our guest, Sigmund Bloom of Footballguys.com. Hey, Sigmund, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's great to join y'all, and we're all staying up here. We're at the apex of the fantasy football regular season, week 7, and I think the waiver wire is a perfect topic just to remind people to stay with it. I think we all know the best team in our league right now is not going to be the best team by week 13, and some of the teams that aren't great with perseverance can be ready to make a run in the playoffs.
That's a great way to put it. So I put together my rankings this morning. I thought to myself, this is probably the worst waiver wire crop I've seen all year. There isn't anyone I'd even spend $5 on. Is this your take too, or is there anyone you're excited about?
No, I would tend to agree with that. And I would also add to that it's something to keep in mind about the way that you dole out your waiver wire bucks over the season, that if you're waiting, if you're trying to be the one who's sitting with the hammer week by week 10, 11, 12, 13, there aren't always players that show up. The bird in hand, maybe Tariq Cohen hasn't worked out, maybe Tavorius Allen hasn't worked out, but the bird in hand of those first few weeks when you also can enjoy that player services for the whole year sometimes works out better than if we wait and that train never comes.
This is the first year where I spent my fab bucks really early, and it's paid off so well. I got myself Jerick McKinnon. Now, of course, I think he lost his job, but I flipped him plus somebody else for Ezekiel Elliott, and that is looking beautiful right now. I was pretty pumped about that.
Ezekiel Elliott, I don't even know what to do right now. I mean, I'm of the mindset, can we just mention this real quick? Just say, where are you at with this whole Cowboys backfield situation? Would you sell Ezekiel Elliott if you had him, knowing that he's probably going to face a 6-game suspension? Are you buying Darren McFadden? Are you buying Alfred Morris? Like, what are you looking at here?
I would probably hold Zeke. I don't know that McFadden or Morris are going to change your season. McFadden, I think, would get the first shot, but he gets hurt. He could underperform. And this isn't the Cowboys running game from last year. This isn't the same offensive line. I think they could be just as well off turning to Dak Prescott, like we talked about on my show last week, as he was outstanding in week 7. But and this is all just, lick your finger, put in the air, see which way the wind's blowing kind of stuff. But I would think that that they granted the temporary injunction to begin with, to allow Zeke to continue to play, would indicate to me that it's more likely than not that they will say, for fairness, because they're finding some sort of potential irreparable harm to Elliott, that this should play itself out. And we can all feel 99.9% assured when it does play out, just like it did with Tom Brady, it will result in a 6-game suspension. But if it's allowed to play out through the legal system, then it won't result in the 6-game suspension this year.
Yeah, it's a really weird situation, and that's why I just wanted to touch on it, just because, there's a lot of people out there that have asked me about Ezekiel Elliott and what they do, and I just think if you can get someone safer on your roster, like, I'm not talking about trading him away for dicey options, like guys like Demaryius Thomas, stuff like that, but if you can get an every-week fantasy performer, maybe a little bit of a downgrade, I would do that. Like, if you can get Melvin Gordon or someone like that for him right now, though, that's the type of player I'm looking for. It's just,
Is that a downgrade, though? I mean, Melvin Gordon has been getting so many targets now on top of the 20-plus carries, scoring all these touchdowns in what I think is a good offense. I'm not so sure that I'd rather have Zeke over Melvin Gordon if Zeke was playing the whole season.
Oh God, I would rather have Zeke. I mean, I think Gordon has been a little bit fluky in terms of his touchdown output. He already has 4 receiving touchdowns. That's not going to continue. That's definitely going to come down to earth a little bit, and it's going to swing a little bit towards Keenan Allen, who has 1 touchdown despite having the second most targets in the NFL right now. So I do think that there's going to be some regression in the touchdown department for Melvin Gordon. He hasn't even reached 400 yards on 117 carries this year. So again, Melvin, I definitely think he's a downgrade. But Zeke, even for someone like Leonard Fournette, I would do that. If I can get even LaShawn McCoy, I may do that.
If it's if we're talking about an adjacent move, or monopoly terms, if you're going from Park Place and Boardwalk to maybe like Philadelphia, or God, it's been a while since I played Monopoly. Staying on that same side of the board. I wouldn't go to the other side of the board.
Right. You're not taking Alvin Kamara for Ezekiel Elliott or anything like that.
No, or Carlos Hyde even,
So I'm surprised to hear you guys didn't mention, you're talking about the waiver wire additions, and I think that that's the general sense in a lot of leagues, and I really did not think that this one player would be available in as many leagues as he is, but Corey Davis is only owned in 24% of leagues. This is one I don't understand. And this is a player that I'd be willing to spend 30% of my fab budget on because Corey Davis is we don't often find wide receivers in the waiver wire who can be every single week producers. And Corey Davis, I think, is just that. He's a guy that has only played 1 game with Marcus Mariota, one full game. And in that 1 full game, he saw 10 targets. Corey Davis, think about that. He had 0 time with Marcus Mariota in the preseason because he missed it with the hamstring injury. He re-injured it in week 2. He's been out since then. You've seen Marcus Mariota struggle without Corey Davis. I think that there's a reason that the Titans knew they had to go out and reach for Corey Davis at pick number 5 instead of waiting till the second pick that they had in the first round. So I just think that Corey Davis walks back into this offense and he is a target machine. I just don't think you're ever able to find a wide receiver on the waiver wire who you could lock in for 8 targets a game. And I think that's exactly what you're getting with Corey Davis.
Is he your number 1 pickup tags? I see that one expert put Corey Davis as their top pickup. The average expert has him at number 12, way down there. I had him higher than that at number 8, and I thought I was a little bit bold there. You've got him at number 1?
I have him at number 1. I would not take someone like Latavius Murray over him. I would not take JuJu Smith-Schuster over him. At number 2 on the list, I have Deion
Hold
Lewis.
on. I want to ask you a question about this because you are not high on Mike Williams. Now, if you're looking at Mike Williams and Corey Davis, they're the same talent level, right? Most people thought Mike Williams was going to be drafted higher. They both have a lot of competition. Corey Davis has Rashard Matthews. He's got Eric Decker, not anymore, really. Delaney Walker. They passed the ball to the backfield too. What's really the big difference between these guys? Because I don't even think you'd pick up Mike Williams if he was available, would you?
So it narrows it down. This is narrowed down for me by position, for scarcity on the team at the position. So Corey Davis is by far the most talented wide receiver on the Titans once he walks back onto the field. Rashard Matthews is a fine situational player. I think he's a fine number 2 to have in the offense, but I also think there's a reason the Titans said, we're going to spend equity to make sure we get a number 1 in here. Eric Decker looks like he's done. I don't know if the injuries have amounted to this. It seemed like he was on the upswing, but then he goes and doesn't catch a single pass against the Browns, who were without Jason McCourty last week. It's difficult to say that Corey Davis doesn't walk into that number 1 role, whereas someone like Mike Williams has to pass, he has to pass Keenan Allen, who's seeing a majority of targets. He has to pass Hunter Henry now, who's on the field for over 80% of the snaps. He has to pass Melvin Gordon, who's being targeted a ton in the running game. Travis Benjamin, Tyrell Williams. There's just so many players in this offense, and they're all competent players, whereas the Titans, I think that they were getting by with their run game, and they had just enough in the passing game. Sig, are you of the mindset with me, where you think that Corey Davis can be an every week wide receiver 3? Or do you think that he's just another waiver wire pickup, kind of like a Smith-Schuster or, like a Kenny Stills?
No. And because he barely was with the team, as he was recovering from his ankle issue in the spring, and he opened this camp as their number 1 receiver. Dazzled everybody at training camp for the brief time he was healthy, hurt his hamstring. Comes out in week 1. They wanted to ease him back in week 1, and I still think he had 10 targets and not 6 catches or something like that in week 1. And then he gets hurt again. What this all amounts to is they want to give Corey Davis the largest role that he can handle, and he can live up to it as long as he's healthy. And I had a big gap between Davis and Williams in terms of talent, and that doesn't even speak to the situation. Yeah, I just think that Davis can do so much more than Mike Williams. Mike Williams is big. Mike Williams is strong. Mike Williams can win when the ball is in the air. But Corey Davis is more of an AJ Green type where he can run really sharp routes. He has excellent adjustments to the ball as far as his ball skills, not just when he's hanging in the air, but as a fluid athlete. He's very aggressive after the catch. He has more than enough speed to win on double moves. He's not a burner, but he can, because of his route running and the way you have to honor the whole route tree with him, he can win on double moves. And he was doing it when teams knew that he was all they had, and he was still doing it. So I think that Corey Davis was the real deal. I was orgasmic whenever they picked him number 5 because I don't know if y'all remember, go off on a tangent here, but leading up to the draft, there was some talk he might fall all the way to the second round because he didn't get to work out because of his ankle. And I just on our live show during the draft, I just gushed to John Robinson for having the guts to follow through and see that he was clearly the best receiver in the draft. And then, of course, Williams and Ross go off the board right after that. So the wide receiver was coming, so he anticipated that or maybe even caused that. But, yeah, Corey Davis is the guy, and he would be my number one priority. Now, I don't know that you would have to pay in fab bucks for him. See, I actually have him. So I do a waiver wire column where I estimate fab buck range, but it's more to give you priorities across positions and within a position than to say bid this much. But I have him a little bit lower. The only receiver I have over him this week is Ted Ginn. But I have him a little bit lower because I think if he's still out there and with Tennessee on bye, people are not going to prioritize picking him up. So you can sneak him off the waiver wire this week.
So you think you could get him for like $5-6 instead of the 30 Ted's is willing to spend? Okay.
Yeah, if he's been sitting there, especially if he's been sitting there week out. Now, he's worth that. I think that's a good gauge of what he's worth. I'm not sure that that's what you have to pay to get him.
I might have to reevaluate here.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that was a good point made by Sig there, is that if Corey Davis has been sitting on the waiver wire for a couple weeks and for whatever reason you didn't pick him up and nobody else has picked him up, yeah, I think you guys can absolutely just spend maybe $7 and just say, yeah, I'll get him because nobody obviously picked him up. But I will say that news just dropped not long ago that he returned to practice and they're expecting him to play once they return from their bye. And obviously they're saying this very early. They've been very upfront about this, ruling Corey Davis out early in the week. They've taken their time to make sure this hamstring isn't a problem going forward, unlike DeMarco Murray. So I do love Davis. Just understand that you're going to be without him for this week with them on a bye, which is probably a good thing for his health.
Well, let me ask you this too. I mean, we've seen what a really tough schedule can do to someone as talented as Amari Cooper. I don't think we think Corey Davis is going to be as good as Amari Cooper was his first 2 years. I mean, he was exceptional, over 1,000 yards. Corey Davis goes up against Baltimore after the bye, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh. All three of those are top 5 pass defenses. Then he gets Houston, Patrick Peterson, Trumaine Johnson, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Are you worried about that?
It's not ideal. I hadn't even taken a look at the schedule of the Ravens. That's not a great matchup on the perimeter with Brandon Carr playing pretty well. Jimmy Smith is good. The Bengals, Adam Jones, he should be back by that time. Drake Kirkpatrick's there. The Steelers, I want to say the Steelers have not allowed like a wide receiver over 70 yards this year, which is kind of phenomenal. Sig, while we have you on, Sig, can you talk about that? Because you're a big Steelers guy. Is this defense legit?
It's better than the Jaguars pass defense, man. It's the best in the league.
Yeah. Well, okay. The Steelers have a lot of speed on defense. They have a lot of aggression. They'll blitz. Having Cameron Hayward back has been huge up front.
Yeah.
Bud Dupree was really coming on in this previous game. T.J. Watt's been an excellent addition. Of course, Ryan Shazier can fly all over the field. But let's be clear. When we look at these rankings, and this is important, looking at the schedule is always important, but here's who the Steelers have faced at quarterback this year. Deshaun Kaiser, Case Keenum, Mike Glennon, Joe Flacco, Blake Bortles, the superstar Alex Smith, and Andy Dalton.
Wow, that is a really, really good point. Man, that is an easy schedule.
We'll see.
Okay, before we move on, I wanted to tell you all about a new giveaway we have going on. Tags, you have an awesome home office, but you're missing like a Jay Cutler fathead, man.
Oh my God. It's so funny. I've been meaning to get one of those things, but it's not going to be a Jay Cutler one, though.
I know. It wouldn't be. It'd probably be Amari Cooper, especially after that performance. But fathead.com for you guys listening at home has so many cool wall decals. I'm sure you guys have seen them. And it isn't just players or logos or helmets. You can get custom fat heads of your kids playing sports or Star Wars decals, all kinds of stuff. Super easy to install and they look great. And we're giving away a $100 gift card to fathead.com. And if you want to enter the drawing, just subscribe and review us on iTunes. Then take a screenshot and send it to us at contest@fantasypros.com. Also, we've got a promo code for everyone. You get 10% off if you use the promo code FANTASYPROS, all one word, at fathead.com. Tags, I've got a few of these bad boys on my Christmas list, man.
Oh yeah, the fathead thing is something that's interesting to me because like I'm trying to figure out how to line up the helmets in my office because if I build this stand that I want to across the top, I'll be able to fit multiple fatheads, which would obviously be ideal. But again, Jay Cutler, cracked ribs. I don't know if I'm going Cutler, but maybe it will be the greatest receiver of all time, Amari Cooper. I don't know. I haven't decided yet.
He's off to a great start, man. A lot of people don't realize this, but he's off to a better start than Jerry Rice was. Off to a better start than Calvin Johnson was. That is not hyperbole.
Yeah, people don't understand is that in his first 2 years in the league, he had 1,000 yards. That's only been done by 7 other players. And one guy on Twitter came at me and said, "Oh, it's because it's today's NFL and it's pass happy." Then why haven't other receivers done it? Get that crap out of here.
Yep, I'm with you.
Oh man, Bobby, who is your? So let's go back to Bobby. Bobby, who's your number one waiver wire addition? Because you were saying that you had Corey Davis. Who are the first top guys on your board? Even though as you guys mentioned, it's not a very big week to spend up, so a lot of guys are going to be very differing in opinions. But who's your number one guy?
I'd spend $5 on Latavius Murray. I think he has the highest ceiling of anyone out here. I mean, the Vikings going to have a lot of positive game scripts with their defense. He could settle into 15 plus carries a week. I mean, each of the past 2 weeks, he's got quite a bit of work. It was just overshadowed the week before because Jerick McKinnon went off. But it seems like he's the guy there for the Minnesota Vikings. He's going to get the goal line touches as well. And, I know Jerick McKinnon's there. I'd say there's a 30% chance he even becomes an RB2 most weeks. But I think that's better than everybody else out there, right?
What do you think, Sig?
Yeah, I agree. Well, I have him as top priorities in my waiver wire lineup this week would be Aaron Jones if he was dropped. Just because, because if the Green Bay's, I mean, he actually looked great, and Green Bay would be smart to, at least for the first quarter and a half or two, ride him until they fall behind. And Murray equal and Ginn, and Hunter Henry if he's been slipping through the cracks. And I always cast a very wide net because I've heard from too many people over the years. I've been doing a waiver wire show for a long time, waiver wire piece, and you just never know. But Latavius Murray is going to get 15 to 18 touches a game. He does get goal line looks. He was getting goal line looks even when McKinnon was scoring. And for the first time this week, he looked like the back that Minnesota thought they were getting when they signed him. And they are run blocking much better than they did last year. A great point about the game scripts they're going to get with Case Keenum or Teddy Bridgewater. They're going to remain a conservative offense. So all that looks like Murray is a matchup flex and even a matchup running back too. And again, and I'll just go off on a tangent here. Over the rest of the season, depending on what happens, we may not get a better running back on the waiver wire than Latavius Murray, as far as your expected week-to-week touches and output. And that's why I think, and keep with that in mind, as we're hitting the weeks now with 6 teams on bye, and as we get through the bye week gauntlet, one of the things that I always preach year in, year out is most of your bench in the second half of the season should be backup running backs. And
agree.
And this is the time to start to look to not necessarily, and while others are maybe going for Jalen Richard or DeAndre Washington, who have some opportunity this week, you may be looking further ahead for somebody like, and this is someone that Mike and I talked about last week, Malcolm Brown, who again looked good in late mop-up duty behind Todd Gurley, maybe even Mike Tolbert, who Buffalo's running the ball well. Buffalo's a competitive team. Rex Burkhead probably is still out there. He's being worked back into this offense. Any running back in the Patriots
he could get a bunch of? You think he could get a bunch of carries though, Rex Burkhead? I don't know how big his ceiling is.
If injuries strike, Dion Lewis has never been the best at staying healthy. Mike Gillislee had hamstring hangers all off season. James White's role seems to be set. James White does not seem like they're going to ask him to do more than what they're asking him to do. Rex Burkhead his role could expand, and it's the Patriots offense. Even TJ Yeldon, who despite looking really good, is probably going to get very little interest on the waiver wire going into his bye week. But if Leonard Fournette goes down, I wonder if the Jags would reconsider how they allot carries. And let's remember that Chris Ivory has never stayed the healthiest. Things change really fast. I mean, I started out talking about Aaron Jones, right? The night that Aaron Jones became a hot waiver wire pickup, he was a third-string running back at the beginning of that game. So things change really quickly. What I want to look for is talent and situation. And if the opportunity part of that equation is what's not there, give it time. In any NFL season, give it time. Most running backs eventually get some opportunity with the injury attrition. So, I watched TJ Yeldon yesterday look really good. And,
Yes.
Maybe it's a little bit of gas in his tank, knowing that he's been a healthy scratch, etc. But we know the Jag situation is a good one. And now we're reminded that he's a second-round talent and not a bust of a second-round talent. There's still talent there. So I'm trying to get guys on my bench that I see the situation, I see the talent, and we're just waiting for opportunity.
I like that call. I mean, I'm looking at my waiver wires. I've got 14 players I'd maybe pick up. And then after that, it's all backup running backs like a James Conner, Charkandrick West, guys who are going to get, 15, maybe 20 plus carries a week if the starter goes out.
Yep, Sig and I talked about Charkandrick West on his show last week, so that's definitely a player I'd look at. The TJ Yeldon one's interesting because I updated my Dynasty trade value chart. I released that on Friday or Saturday last week, and someone actually, before the games even took place, he goes, Mike, why is TJ Yeldon still in there as a top 45 running back for Dynasty? He's not worth a late second-round pick, right? And I said, I think people just automatically forget because how good Fournette is that TJ Yeldon, it wasn't supposed to be a really good running back. Nobody on the Jaguars, including Chris Ivory, was running the ball very well for them last year. They've kind of rebuilt the offensive line. They've rebuilt the offense. They're actually running a lot of 6 offensive linemen plays, which is really helping out Leonard Fournette. It's helping the run game. TJ Yeldon looked a little bit thinner actually when I was watching him this weekend. He looked spry, which is something that we didn't see too much from last year. He looked very pedestrian, like he wasn't moving with urgency or anything like that. So you might be onto something there. But what if, so let's pretend this. Let's pretend someone has bye week hell this week and they're looking to pick up one running back. They don't want him. They're not necessarily thinking about for the future because they're going to end up dropping him, whatever. Who would you pick up this week? Would you say it would be Dion Lewis? So the Patriots are going to be at home against the Chargers. Would you pick up DeAndre Washington, who's going to be starting supposedly for Marshawn Lynch at Buffalo? Or would you go with Latavius Murray, who's playing at the Browns? And by the way, I do want to mention the Browns have allowed just 2.95 yards per carry on the season, and I want to say just 2 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, they've been tough. Really good.
Yeah, Dion Lewis. It's Dion Lewis. And with Dion Lewis, and maybe this is where I hold on to the past too much. I'll fully cop to that. But in 2015, Dion Lewis was a sensation. He was a running back one. He was handling all kinds of roles in the Patriots offense. He was the kind of rare running back they had that could play in the 2-minute drill. He could run between the tackles. He was a dangerous receiver out of the backfield. Bill Belichick talked about deception and being able to have it so that teams didn't know based on the running back they had in what play they were going to run or what angle they were going to go. And Dion Lewis gives them that. So does Rex Burkhead, which is why I'm stashing Rex Burkhead away. But we already know Dion Lewis can ball. We already know this Patriots offense can create astronomical numbers for the backfield. Maybe it's chopped up between 2 or 3 guys, but things change. And he looked just as good last night against Atlanta as I could have hoped, getting that early opportunity. And look, he ran the ball from the 9 to the 5 and the 5 to the 1, and then they let Mike Gillislee get the next carry, and he lost 2 yards. So I have a feeling we're going to see Lewis get that first call at the goal line going forward, and you just never know when that Patriots offense is going to create a 2 or 3 touchdown game for him.
Yeah, you have to wonder why they even brought in Gillislee. That's the thing, is if they had such a short leash for him, and it's not to say he was doing many things special, but I don't think he was doing anything necessarily wrong on that team. The offensive line, he was facing a lot of stacked boxes. I want to say over the first 5 weeks, it was something like 52% 8-man fronts, which is a lot. But again, he wasn't doing anything significant, so I could understand going to Dion Lewis, who's outplaying him right now. And that's why Dion Lewis is my number 1 running back pickup.
Me too.
I actually agree with you. I think against the Chargers, you definitely would want to play him this week. The Chargers are allowing the most yards per game on the ground. Dion Lewis hasn't added much via the pass, but we know that he's capable if they need him to, if something were to happen to James White. So you kind of have a built-in handcuff as one of the primary pass catchers out of the backfield too. Do like the Rex Burkhead one. I just don't know how comfortable we can be with a running back outside of James White and maybe Dion Lewis right now in this offense. It's just, you don't feel comfortable putting Gillislee in your lineup. You don't feel comfortable with Burkhead. It's just, you have to wonder about their offseason moves when they had the guys they needed in place already. You know what I mean? But On the wide receiver front, Sig, do you think that JuJu Smith-Schuster, we talked about him last week, so I don't need to talk about him too much, but I'm curious to hear your take being a Steeler guy. Is Martavis Bryant, do you think it's a realistic possibility that he's traded? And if he is, what does that make JuJu?
There is a realistic possibility, just because I think that you never want someone around your clubhouse that doesn't want to be there. And they already have to feel uncertain about what they're going to get from Bryant, taking this stuff to social media. And things are going well right now for the Steelers after the debacle against the Jags. I think even if they don't trade Martavis Bryant, Bryant's snap counts have trended down to about 50-50, and it's not like he's been that productive, and he isn't necessarily even flashing the tactical value that he had stretching the defense, that JuJu Smith-Schuster may well become a mainstay in this offense without Bryant getting traded. So it's a good offense. And here's the other thing. The Steelers, I don't want to say the Steelers pass offense is a sleeping giant. Maybe they're a sleeping medium to large, you know. I mean, because Ben Roethlisberger seems to have his mojo back. He was making the kinds of throws against Cincinnati that we've seen him make in the past, although they had to settle for 5 field goals, so they're not quite over the hump yet. But they faced a tough schedule, a road schedule. You know, Chicago's pass defense is actually really good. Baltimore's pass defense, you know, they were able to kind of take the foot off the gas in that one. Obviously, there's the Jacksonville game, but looking ahead, the Steelers have 2 road games, but against Detroit and Indy, and then 4 of the next 5 weeks, they're at home, where Roethlisberger is always better. Tennessee, Green Bay, Baltimore, and New England. And then the Houston Texans in Week 16, which could easily be a shootout down in Houston. So the Steelers' pass offense numbers are going to look a lot better, I believe, in the second half of the year than they have in the first half of the year. And Smith-Schuster can just ride that wave. He's been catching 3 or 4 balls in every game. He's caught a touchdown in 2 of the last 4 games, 3 of the last 6 games. So you know that he's got Roethlisberger's eye there. I think Smith-Schuster is that under-the-radar pickup where we could easily see 3-4 catches a game turn to 5-6 catches a game. You add in a touchdown every other week, that's a wide receiver 3.
Who has a higher ceiling tags, do you think? Smith-Schuster or Kenny Golladay? I mean, they're both available in like 85% of leagues. I have them neck and neck right behind Kenny Stills as my number 1 wide receiver.
Well, while Golden Tate's out, I would say Golladay probably has the higher ceiling for the short term. If you're looking for someone like right now, if you need a bye week replacement, I'd probably go Golladay. But at the same time, if you're looking long term, I'd much rather have JuJu for the rest of the season.
Yeah, rest of the season I have JuJu higher, so he's my my number 7 overall pickup.
Where I'm torn, Bobby, is that Jordan Matthews, you know, he came back last week. I know he didn't do much, and his targets on the year, I want to say he has like 13 targets on the year, which is just, it's insane to think that he's played, you know, a majority of the games and he has like 13 targets when Zay Jones has been awful, like legitimately like the least efficient wide receiver in the game of football. So Jordan Matthews, Bobby, Sig, why don't you guys chime in, whoever you want. But Jordan Matthews, what do we think about him? Is he worth a waiver wire pickup? Do you leave him on the waiver wire if he's there? And if you do go for him, how much do you spend on him?
I've got him in my second tier for $1. He's right there with Robbie Anderson, Cooper Kupp, Paul Richardson, Marquise Lee. I mean, if you need a warm body, he's your guy, but he's really nothing more than that to me.
I'm sorry, did I miss the segment when we talk about Deontay Thompson?
You did not miss. No, you did not.
Really?
Is he a pickup over Jordan Matthews?
Yeah. Sometimes I think we overthink this, right? He ran 14 routes, caught 4 passes for 107 yards. Tyrod Taylor keeps plays alive. He keeps his eyes downfield when he keeps plays alive. He is an aggressive downfield passer, and he and Deontay Thompson had something going right away. Deontay Thompson's like a 4-3 guy. There's tons of opportunity there, and we've seen what Jordan Matthews can do. And Matthews is okay, but Matthews may catch 3 or 4 or 5 passes a game, but he's not. Deontay Thompson can make your week with 1 catch,
and the Bears let him go.
Well, that was the stat, right? Mitch Trubisky had 107 passing yards in the win. It was a win. Hey, the Bears are contenders. And Thompson had 107 receiving yards. So I think the angle here is Deontay Thompson, because there's something. I mean, look. This is one of the things we deal with fantasy football. And Mike, I think you made this point on my show last week. Like, we have to make these decisions with incomplete information. Obviously, that's what the art or dark art that this is. But if there's a story of, hey, Deontay Thompson has something really good going with Tyrod Taylor and they can reproduce, we don't need 4 for 107 every week. 3 for 70 or 4 for 80 is viable when you're getting a touchdown thrown in there every other week or every third week, or chances. Like, he's getting those high value fantasy targets downfield, and they're going to stay committed to run the ball, which is good because it's going to set up off of play action those passes downfield. But if there is a story where Deontay Thompson is a surprise waiver wire pickup that helps tilt your team towards being a winner in the second half, this is how it starts. It may not end up there, but this is how it starts.
We saw Ed Dixon go for 170 yards too. I mean, it was just one game. Like, I'd rather have Demarcus Robinson, who I think is a superior athlete in a better offense, and I think he's going to get a lot of targets moving forward. And it started last week.
And he was getting open. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I know you. Go ahead. It's because It's tough for me to talk about Thompson. With the Bears, he was the one who was playing the most snaps through, obviously, I think the first 5 weeks. I think he led the team in snaps, and then they let him go, only to see him go to Buffalo and play pretty well in his debut. I mean, he was only with the team for a couple of days. But DeMarcus Robinson, you heard Tony Romo talking about him a lot, is saying that the kid, it was just getting him onto the field and the fact that he looked really good. And by the way, if you guys have not listened to Tony Romo commentate a game, do it, because Tony Romo is probably the best out there right now. I mean, I don't think is that what you'd say too, Sig?
Yeah, and he was getting open in the loss to the Steelers. Alex Smith just didn't find him, and you saw it, him getting open. And he was a 4th round pick, maybe a 2nd round athlete, but there were some character questions, and obviously Andy Reid does a tremendous job with these kinds of cases and getting the best football out of these guys. And even with Chris Conley going down, it wasn't Albert Wilson getting I think Wilson was banged up, which was part of it, but I think it's clear now that Robinson is that number one. The number 2, the leader to be the number 2 going forward. And with that athleticism, they also love his run after catch ability. We haven't got to see that quite yet, but you see with Tyreek Hill and what he can do to threaten defenses deep, what that opens up underneath for Robinson and or Kelsey, and this offense, because of some of the deficiencies they have in their secondary, is probably going to have to continue to put up a lot of points to win games. So all that points, I like that call. Robinson, I think we've hit on some of the good ones here. Robinson, so first tier, Corey Davis and JuJu Smith-Schuster. Second tier, Robinson, Kenny Golladay, especially with Colt and Tate out, with an immediate opportunity there, and Deontay Thompson. And then, there's the obvious ones. I mean, the guys like Hearns and Lee with Blake Bortles actually throwing the ball well, and so on. I mean, I don't want to gloss over those guys, but I think this is that staying one step ahead, where we're looking at what players have done in small sample sizes. Like Golladay was barely healthy, and in that first game against Arizona, and some of it's Arizona's pass defense. We want to target players playing Arizona, but Golladay was able to add a vertical dimension to their pass offense, which they just haven't had without him. And Thompson doing the same thing. Robinson just getting open at will, and defense is paying a lot more attention to Hill and Kelsey. So these are the guys who the arrow is pointing up for.
A big lottery ticket. Another one I like is Westbrook for the Jaguars. Super talented, just like Robinson.
Yeah, I was just about to say that before Sig gets out of here. I know that we got to get going, but what do you think about D.D. Westbrook and the fact that he's come back week 9? That's when they're expecting him back after the bye. So he looked really good in the preseason. Marquise Lee's been playing a little banged up, hasn't played well. Allen Hearns was number 4 on the depth chart before the season started. He was behind Allen Robinson. He was behind Westbrook. So what do you think of Westbrook? Is he like a stash in 12-man leagues, or do you wait?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, if these other names that we've been talking about are gone, absolutely, and you're looking again at ceiling, now maybe he'd be the number 3 receiver at first, but as you said, Lee's been banged up. Hearns certainly knows the injured time on the injury report in his past too. But the thing about Westbrook is, and again, I just want to continue to stress this, like we don't need to overthink this. Kenny Golladay, short, small sample, big production, maybe it could continue. Deontay Thompson, DeMarcus Robinson.
Yeah.
And the other thing is these are all young very young players. Thompson's not that young now, but Thompson's never been given a big opportunity. Young players that we haven't seen the reveal, and the first little peek behind the curtain with Robinson and Golladay has been very, very good. The first peek behind the curtain in D.D. Westbrook, and don't get me wrong, this is like third, fourth quarter against players mostly that didn't make the team. He was unstoppable.
Yeah.
I loved Westbrook at Oklahoma. I compared him, and as a Syracuse, I want to say this, as a Syracuse grad who was there when he was there. So, and I'm not saying that he's going to be this good, but he's a similar receiver to Marvin Harrison.
Whoa.
There's all this talk that, and I'm saying this because, 175, like his body type, like a 5'9",
he's little,
5'10", 100.
Yeah.
So he's thin. Marvin Harrison was just fine. And if you watch Westbrook, what you see is he's so sudden. It's almost unfair how sudden he is in the breaks and his routes. He has a second gear. He has acceleration. He has deep speed and acceleration. He's very aggressive after catch. I'll give you another one maybe, and this was somebody that I had also compared to Marvin Harrison in terms of the kind of game. And it's sad now because he doesn't have a quarterback. But
John Brown.
Also Smokey Brown. He's similar. He's another similar kind of player to Smokey Brown, where you have a deep speed to take the top off a defense. You have like ice skating, carving routes that defensive backs can't mirror. And you also have a guy that can do things after the catch. And Westbrook is a tough player despite his small stature. Now, the only problem here is the situation, but I would argue that kind of receiver who can take short passes and do things after the catch or can get downfield and behind the defense is exactly the kind of receiver that Blake Bortles can make the most of, if there is such a thing.
And help stretch the field for Leonard Fournette.
And set up the play action. Fournette sets up the play action bombs deep. So it was comforting to see Blake Bortles throw the ball well. Now that maybe was the game plan to put Bortles at the center of the offense was maybe a 1 week thing without Leonard Fournette, but they're building his confidence. And Westbrook, every time he was on the field in the preseason, just produced every time. And there's a chance that will just, they'll put him back out there for, just like Deontay Thompson, right? They'll put him back out there for 15 snaps when he comes back after the bye, and he'll catch 2 passes for 50 yards.
Yeah.
And then the next week it'll be 30, and it'll be 3 for 80. And the next, we just can't keep this kid off the field,
I like it.
And the future's very bright for him too, with Allen Robinson, free agent, Marquise Lee, free agent. Alan Hearns is vastly overpaid for what he can provide. Not that he's not a solid player, but they just got a little overeager with signing him to that extension. So Westbrook is absolutely one of my favorites. And one more thing too, this is another thing like DeMarcus Robinson. Character risk, big character risk. Tom Coughlin. When Tom Coughlin says, we're okay, I'll sign off. And they took him at the top of the 4th round. So as soon as the third day of the draft was on, they were racing to get him. I think that from a play standpoint, he's a 1st or 2nd rounder. He falls the 2nd round because of character. But I think we're going to see that play come to the surface again. All
right, Sigmund. Well, we really appreciate you coming on the show. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, always a pleasure. I always look forward to any chance to talk to you guys. And it's funny. This is, this is that point. These are the kinds of, and I love talking in depth about these pickups because these are the moves that you look back in your fantasy football championship, and you maybe only have 3 or 4 players in your championship lineup you drafted, and there's one player, a D.D. Westbrook, a Malcolm Brown, or that you picked up because you had that. You don't need to carry an extra quarterback because your starting quarterback's bye is over, and you have one extra spot, and you do that pickup, not because of what they can give you right now, but because of what they might be able to give you. And it ends up being the difference between you winning and losing a championship. And that's why I love the perseverance that is rewarded in fantasy football. And I'll toss one more out before I go. One more. If you have an extra roster spot in your pocket, you don't know what to do with it. Greg Olsen.
Oh, yeah. Great call.
4 weeks away.
Great call.
4 weeks away. And it's like you're going to see some Greg Olsen. His injury is, I think you're going to see him back after their bye in week 12, and potentially an instant tight end 1. Cam Newton's throwing the ball better. So if all these names are gone, don't waste a roster spot. Just hold on to Greg Olsen. It'll pay off.
Yeah, top 4 tight end during the fantasy football playoffs. You cannot beat that for a $1 waiver wire ad.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah, he was someone that was in my buy column last week because some people may have just if you find an owner in your league that's struggling that has let's say he has him and they've been holding on to him in IR and they've started the season 2-5. They can't wait around for Greg Olsen, so you might be able to get him for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah. Okay, Tex, so we've got 3 segments. We're going to kind of blaze through these, so it's going to be quick-hitting answers. And I really like this new segment edition we're going to be talking about on every waiver wire show. It's from one of our listeners. I'm sorry the name's escaping me right now, but it's a great idea because we have so many people ask us, who should we drop? And, it's dependent on your roster, but there's a few players who keep coming up. What do you think about Andrew Luck? Would you drop him, Tags?
Yeah, unfortunately, I was late to this party. I was one telling people to go out there and get him. But, with the doctor saying that, it's another 2 to 3 weeks of setback. No, he's not playing. I don't think he's playing this year. And if he does return, it's going to be around week 14, which are you going to trust a quarterback coming off shoulder surgery in the first week of fantasy
playoffs?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. And by the way, drop any backup quarterback or tight end you have too. The top streamer is nearly always better than your backup quarterback. And if the top streamer isn't better, that means you have too much trade value just rotting on your bench. So if you have Marcus Mariota as your second quarterback or Kirk Cousins or whoever your awesome backup is, go ahead and trade him for a Carlos Hyde or Amir Abdullah.
If you can get one of those guys, kudos to you. But yeah, it's ugly. Now, Bobby, here's my question on the running back position. Let's talk about continuing with the drop segment. Let's talk about a few running backs. I think Frank Gore is droppable. Do you agree with me?
Nope. I don't think so. I mean, there is bye week time right now. I'll drop him in 2 weeks when there's not 6 teams on bye, but right now someone's going to need him for the flex. He's still getting 4-5 fantasy points every week. He's got, coin flip at a touchdown. So I would feel fine putting Frank Gore in my flex just for these next 2 weeks and then drop him no matter what.
I'd rather own Marlon Mack, and I'd play Marlon Mack over him. I said that to someone last week. There's so many. Deion Lewis I'd rather own than Frank Gore. Another person I think is droppable is Isaiah Crowell. I mean, he's seeing those touches too. I
was about to ask about him, yeah.
Yeah, he's been seeing those touches too, and I did my rest of season rankings earlier today, and Gore and him are both outside my top 45 running backs. So if you want to drop them, if you feel like there's better options out there, feel free to do so.
There's going to be people starting Jalen Richard this week, though. He's in a split. I would not do it. I like DeAndre Washington better. He has more talent, but Jalen Richard's going to get 10 to 12 carries in a week where so many people are on a bye. They're going to be starting Jalen Richard. So I'd rather play Frank Gore.
I don't know. That's a tough one. So the Colts are playing the Bengals, so I really wouldn't want to trust Frank Gore. I'd rather play Richard, to be honest with you. I know it's not ideal, but I would actually rather play Richard because at least I know he's got more upside than 3 or 4 points, which Frank Gore will give me every single week. So yeah, it's ugly, man. Those are guys that I really can't seem to find in my roster. Who would you be dropping at the running back position?
Well, Isaiah Crowell, I was going to ask about him. I actually would not drop Isaiah Crowell. He had 21 touches last game, man. I understand their offense can't do anything, but 21 touches, I'm not dropping that. There's a player we didn't talk about, by the way, Alex Collins during the waiver wire segment. I've got him in my top 5 still. I mean, I know it was a tough week, but everyone has a tough week against Minnesota. He's still getting plenty of carries. He's still getting lots of yards, and I think he'll be fine moving forward. So I wanted to mention Alex Collins is in my top 5. What about Mike Gillislee or Buck Allen, tags?
Buck, I mean, those are guys I wouldn't drop. I mean, Gillislee, I'm not playing him right now. He's kind of like one of those high upside bench options. So let's pretend that Deion Lewis got hurt or something like that, and they had to go back to Gillislee. I still think Gillislee is a good running back. I just think he fell into a situation that's just really bad.
Has he officially lost his job? Because I don't think he has.
I don't know. It's been 2 weeks running now where Deion Lewis, actually over the last 5 weeks, Deion Lewis has had an increased rushing attempts every single week. So I legitimately cannot play Mike Gillislee right now, and I do own him in a few places. So I'm dropping him into that range of guys like, Bilal Powell, LeGarrette Blount, like that tier of players. So it's just, you kind of just wait and see what develops, because if he gets that goal line rolled back, then he's definitely someone that you want rostered. And that's the thing is, like, when you think about running backs who are in this 30 to 40 range, what you're thinking about, the reason I hang on to Mike Gillislee is because who are you going to pick up that's going to present potentially more upside? I mean, I like Marlon Mack, but I wouldn't rather own Mack than I would Gillislee. So yeah, I wouldn't drop him. And then Buck Allen, it's not looking great for him. Let's just be real about that. But he is their only pass catching back right now.
Yeah. And you guys are going to hear this and you're going to say, like, I'm sure we're going to get plenty of questions. Well, are you sure I shouldn't drop Mike Gillislee because I've got Aaron Jones on my waiver wire? Okay. If it comes down to that, drop Mike Gillislee. Just look at our rest of the season rankings. Like, if you have a question that we don't cover on here, our rest of the season rankings, it's a consensus rest of the season rankings on Fantasy Pros website. Just go to rankings. You can change it to rest of the season over there on the left-hand side, and you can see what tags and I think. That way you can answer all these questions for yourself. For sure. We've also got the great My Playbook tool. I think it's the best thing that we do on the entire website. It takes 5 seconds to upload your team to My Playbook, and then you've got a handful of experts telling you what to do based on your entire league. Everything is out there. So many analytics. It is a beautiful tool. So just upload your team there. Just takes a little bit of time, and you can get all these questions answered, very specific to your team. You can see what all the experts think.
Yeah, it's a fantastic tool. Like, you can set autopilot, like, legitimately. Like, if you're going to be out on a Saturday night and you're like, wow, I can't pay attention to the inactives, we have a setting on there. It's called autopilot. It actually sets your lineup for you based on what experts have said to do. So it's just pretty fantastic. Just, try it out. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But I promise you're going to like it.
Okay, Tags, 3 wide receiver names for you. Eric Decker. Oh, man, he put up a 0. Martavis Bryant, Jamison Crowder.
I wouldn't drop Bryant or Crowder just yet.
I'd drop all 3 of them.
I want to see what happens with Bryant, where he goes, because I do think that they're at the point where they have to trade him. I think it's gone too far. As Sig said, it's gone into social media now, and he didn't show up for practice today. Apparently, he was at the doctor. I don't know. There's a lot of bad stuff going here where it's just like, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up somewhere else. And if he goes somewhere else, he's going to see the targets because someone's taking on a risk there. If they take on a risk, they're going to target him. I think Dante Moncrief is a drop. With Andrew Luck not coming back, Dante Moncrief belongs on waiver wires if you were holding out hope.
I'd drop him too, but I wouldn't drop him for someone like Brandon Coleman or Chris Moore. Like, if you need someone that bad, just keep Dante Moncrief, you know?
I just don't. I think you can get JuJu. I think that JuJu is owned in fewer leagues than Dante Moncrief. I would rather have Josh Doxson than Dante Moncrief. Like, players like that. Another player I think is safe to drop is Jerron Brown. You know, he's someone that kind of hanging around, and he's like the number 4 in the passing game. Maybe the number 3. I guess you could make the argument.
He had one week with targets, like just 1 week. It's not happening.
Yeah, no, he's someone that people were holding on to, seeing if they would drop. But yeah, there's so many players like Tyrell Williams. I think he's one that is borderline drop worthy. I think he's seen a total of 6, maybe 8 targets over the last 3 weeks combined. He's only had 1 game this year where he's produced. Mike Williams is starting to get more snaps. Hunter Henry is playing more snaps. He's just not getting the targets. He's not getting it done. So Tyrell Williams is someone that I would consider dropping as well.
I'd consider dropping him, but again, for these 2 weeks where, you know, there's so many buys going on, I think he's the kind of warm body that you start. I don't think he's any different than really a Marquise Lee, who's like the 15th best pickup this week. So I'd probably hang on to him rather than spending a couple fab bucks. And finally, before we move on to rest of the season rankings, Martellus Bennett, Randall Cobb.
Martellus Bennett, yeah, I think you can, especially if you get an option out there like a Kyle Rudolph on your waiver wire, like a Severian Jenkins or someone like that. Like if you might be sitting,
even have George Kittle.
I mean, it's pretty close. I don't have Kittle as high as him, but I think that when you get into the range of like Zach Miller, guys like that, I would definitely consider dropping Bennett. He wasn't very good with Aaron Rodgers, so what makes us think he's going to do well in the Green Bay offense? You know, with Brett Hundley, who couldn't get anything done. So.
Okay, I have a couple guys, rest of the season rankings I want to ask you about. We'll go pretty fast here. Joe Mixon, Marshawn Lynch, DeMarco Murray.
Joe Mixon is he's a fine play, and it's a little worrisome that he was outsnapped by Gio Bernard this week, coming off their bye week.
He got 7 carries, and he dominated in those 7 carries. They didn't give him the ball in the second half. What is going on here?
Yeah, he didn't carry the ball at all in the second half, and it really is puzzling to me. I just don't know what the Bengals are necessarily doing. I knew they fell behind, and that was my concern with Mixon. I know we talked about it then on the DFS show, is that if they fell behind, were they going to abandon Mixon? And I came around because Mixon actually led the team in receptions coming into that game, despite popular belief.
Pass block.
Yeah. He was a fine pass blocker in college, so I don't know if it hasn't translated to the pros, but I'm curious to kind of go back and watch that game because I only saw bits and pieces of it. I would trade right now. Like, listen, last week I said to trade Devontae Adams for Amari Cooper, and that was before Amari's big game. I'm telling you right now, I would trade DeMarco Murray for Alvin Kamara right now, and you can get it.
Are you serious? Yeah, you could definitely get it. Wow. Let me see my rankings here. I've got Murray number 14. I've got Kamara number 26. So no, I'm not with you on that one, Tex.
Yeah, I have Murray at 19. I have Kamara at 17. For whatever reason, most people don't want to play Kamara, but he's an every week RB2. He's performing in both standard and PPR leagues. Over the last 4 weeks, he's touched the ball, average about 12 times per game, which it's not the most, but he's totaled at least 87 yards and or a touchdown in every one of those games. He's going to be involved regardless of game script because we've seen the Saints dominate the last 2 weeks, and he has still put up numbers. If they fall behind, him and Mark Ingram, he sees more of the passing down work than Mark Ingram does. So consider Alvin Kamara the guy that you thought Christian McCaffrey was going to be. And then you're going to be better off because Alvin Kamara is a better rest of the season option than Christian McCaffrey.
He's going to get almost 100 receptions, man.
He's not playing very good football. I've watched McCaffrey, right, and I made it a point because the guys that I don't like coming into the NFL, I want to pay extra attention to see if I was wrong. Like Deshaun Watson, I didn't like him coming in. Over the first couple of weeks, he kind of looked like the quarterback I thought, actually worse. But now, watching, I have to admit, I have to turn my opinion on certain players. McCaffrey is someone I didn't like, and I still don't like because he just doesn't look very good. He looks like I said, he looks like a Darren Sproles-esque type player that they spent way too much equity on. A guy that wasn't supposed to go until the second round, until everybody started seeing these videos in the combine and this and that. They fell in love with metrics where in fact, he's just too little to play the role that they wanted him to play.
I've still got McCaffrey over Kamara too. Two other running backs here, I don't know what to do with them. Aaron Jones outworked Ty Montgomery and looked awesome doing it. Like he might just steal this job even when Montgomery's healthy. And then Jerick McKinnon, who's been awesome, but he just didn't get the touches last week. It seems like Latavius Murray passed him up for some reason.
Well, Latavius Murray was getting touches before then. So the 2 games before this week, I tried warning people. I tweeted something about it saying that Latavius Murray had actually averaged 15 touches in the 2 games before this past week. And he didn't perform on them. Like it didn't amount to anything. Whereas Jerick McKinnon was the one who was showing up on the stat sheet. I still felt like it was like somewhat of a timeshare, like 55-45 McKinnon, and he's the pass catcher, which is why he's the preferred option. I still think McKinnon is the preferred option, but you kind of lower his ceiling now that we've seen Latavius Murray kind of get over his foot injuries, the struggles that he was having. Aaron Jones is interesting, right? Like he's someone that I put in my sell column this week, and not because he's a bad player, not because I actually think he's a good fantasy asset to have, but I also think that you need to figure out and sell while everything is golden, right? You have a running back behind an offensive line that is not great. I think Brett Hundley demonstrated this past week that he's not going to be Aaron Rodgers, that he's not going to put up 30 points a week like the Packers offense would do. If you take away that one long run from Aaron Jones, that started the game this past week with that touchdown, things look a little bit different, right? I'm not just saying you can't erase those runs. That's why I do think that he's going to be the running back. I think he's like a low-end RB2 for me going forward, but I think some people that maybe own Ty Montgomery, they may say, I'm willing to pay a low-end RB1, high-end RB2 price for him. And if you can do that, that's why I'm selling Aaron Jones.
All right, 3 wide receivers tags. Devontae Parker, he has not been what we expected. Everyone said he was the breakout guy. Nelson Aguilar and Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard's the only guy they have now.
Yeah, Sterling Shepard I'm buying. He's someone that I'm interested in going out and getting him if you can. Now, understand that they're on their bye week in week 8, so you won't have him this week. So maybe it'll help you in your negotiations because that whoever owns him might need a wide receiver. They may be fed up with him, whatever. But knowing that Odell Beckham and Brandon Marshall are out, he's the insto de facto number 1 wide receiver there, which means he's going to see 8+ targets a game. And I went through and looked at it. Of the wide receivers in the NFL right now that are averaging 8 or more targets per game, none of them rank outside the top 24 wide receivers. So Sterling Shepard, I think he's a wide receiver 3 at worst going forward, but he can be had for like wide receiver 4 prices.
I've got Sterling Shepard up ahead of Nelson Aguilar, Marquise Lee, Terrell Pryor, Rashard Matthews, Jermaine Kearse. I mean, you can trade any of these guys. Eric Decker, Willie Snead, Will Fuller. You can trade any of these guys and get yourself Sterling Shepard. I think he's going to get 8-10 targets every single game, tags.
Do you think Aguilar holds that much value?
Yeah. I mean, he's been getting it done, right?
Well, that's the thing is like people like me, like I don't, it's tough for me to say because I haven't tried to trade for him. I don't own Aguilar anywhere, but like when someone is so bad, like as bad as Nelson Aguilar was, like he may have been the worst wide receiver in the league last year. And, he's had a few decent games this year. I'm not going to pretend like he's been like amazing, but he's been solid, a lot better than I think people expected. But I still think that there's a lot of people who would be extremely weary of his production and like afraid that it wouldn't keep up. Someone like if I was looking at Aguilar, I would compare him to someone like maybe like a Cooper Kupp.
Okay. I think that's fair.
Maybe in that range, like a Jamison Crowder. Well, maybe higher than Jamison Crowder with the way he's been playing. But Rashard Matthews, like that area is where I would view someone like Aguilar. Whereas like going up to Sterling Shepard, I'm comparing him to guys like Devontae Adams.
Wow.
Deshaun Jackson. I think that he's up in that tier because, hey, target is king. Like that's the thing is like when you're looking for wide receivers, you want targets, you want consistent targets. And I think he's going to get him. I don't think they have a choice.
I've got him right in between Kelvin Benjamin and John Brown in my ranking. So yeah, same kind of tier, maybe a little lower than you have him.
Yeah, definitely. John Brown is definitely someone that I'm selling, unfortunately. I mean, I don't think you can get anything for John Brown, but yeah, he's actually a drop candidate for me.
My 2 sells are Chris Hogan and Devontae Freeman. I think now that Danny Amendola and Rob Gronkowski are healthy, that they've, figuring out what they want to do with Deion Lewis, that Chris Hogan goes from a low-end wide receiver 1 to a low-end wide receiver 2. I think people are going to look at his stats and still think that he's awesome. I think he is what we thought he was going into the season. Someone who's going to get a lot of work with all these guys being injured and everything, and he is going to continue to get some work, but I just think the production goes down, and now is the time to sell before everyone realizes that. And then Devontae Freeman, he is in a complete timeshare right now with Tevin Coleman, and people still regard him as though he's a top 5 running back. I don't know if he is. I don't know if he's top 10.
Yeah, Devonta Freeman, it's really interesting. I'm interested to see what the Falcons do because like they're obviously not working. Whatever it is they're doing on offense with Sarkisian is not working. They finally started targeting Julio Jones. That touchdown was ridiculous, by the way.
Oh man, it was so good. If you haven't seen the video, go back and watch the Julio Jones highlight reel. By the way, I meant to mention earlier, Demarcus Robinson, just go watch highlights of him in college. He is a special talent.
Yeah, no, he was. Well, that's what Sig was saying. Coming out, he was known as to be like maybe like a second round talent or an athlete or whatever. But real quick, so my wide receivers buy and sell. It's funny because they're two similar receivers. One's a buy, one's a sell. Is Keenan Allen is a buy. I know that he hasn't really produced, but here's the thing. If you own Keenan Allen right now, you're probably listening saying, this guy sucks. Like, why would I want him on my fantasy team? Like, seriously, I would rather trade him away. But understand, with how bad technically that he's played, he sits as the number 14 wide receiver in PPR leagues right now. Like, think about that for a second and understand that he's there with only one touchdown.
That's better than he was drafted as.
Yes, and that's the thing. That's what I'm saying is like I was low on Keenan Allen, but I didn't think he was going to get the targets he's been getting. But if he's getting those targets, the touchdowns will follow eventually. And he's like a primary slot receiver, which means he'll evade the coverage of a lot of top tier cornerbacks. So him, and for the exact opposite reason, Jarvis Landry is a sell. Jarvis Landry has the same exact amount of targets as Keenan Allen does. He's got far less yardage, but he has scored 3 times in 3 games.
And he's not a touchdown scorer. Yep, I'm with you.
No. Yeah, he scored 4 touchdowns in each of the last 2 seasons. It's not going to keep up. Like, again, just because we say someone's a sell, it doesn't mean that you give him away for free. It means that you're selling based on the perception of what he is to people right now. And some people view Jarvis Landry as a borderline wide receiver 1. If you can go out there and flip Jarvis Landry right now for Keenan Allen, I would do that.
Oh, in a heartbeat, yeah. I'd do it for Alshon Jeffrey as well. As we mentioned last week, I think he's still a buy. My big buy of the week, though, is Stephon Diggs. I'm really excited about him. He's been hurt. People are forgetting just how good he is. And even Case Keenum was making him look good. Stephon Diggs is a player. I think you can get him for a mid-range wide receiver 2 value. I think he might be a low-end wide receiver 1 the rest of the season. And then LeGarrette Blount. I mean, we keep talking down on him like he's Frank Gore or something, but he is getting it done behind this offensive line. He keeps getting all these touches. I don't know if people realize how great he's been because he's not getting in the end zone as much, but he will get in the end zone. I like Blount a lot going forward, Tex.
As for the Diggs one, I can't agree with you there. I'm a huge Stephon Diggs fan. Like, he was one of those guys that I said he would be on every one of my fantasy teams, but I'm officially concerned because he's hurt. And if Stephon Diggs tries to play through injuries, bad things happen. If you go back and if you were to type in to your Google search bar right now, like while you're listening to the podcast, type into your Google search bar, type in Tagliere Fantasy Pros Stephon Diggs, and it's going to pop up a player profile that I wrote up on him this offseason, and it goes through and talks about how he performed when he was on the injury report and when he was off the injury report. If he's on the injury report, you legitimately do not want to play Stephon Diggs. So this week,
I think that's why they're resting him though, right?
Yeah, that's the thing is like they have their bye, I want to say after this week against the Browns. So I don't know if they sit him. I would tend to think that they probably will, just to play it safe and say, all right, we'll deal with him without another week. We could beat the Browns without him. But yeah, Stephon Diggs, I am concerned about him.
All right, well, that's all for today's show. We've got 2 more shows coming up this week. We've got our ranking start-sit episode, and we have all kinds of fun new segments in that one coming up, and our DFS show, which is going to be later in the week. Thanks to the sponsor of today's show, leesa.com/fantasypros. That's LEESA.com/fantasypros for $100 off your mattress order. And remember to sign up for the $100 gift card to fathead.com. Take a screenshot of your rating and review on iTunes and send it to us at contest@fantasypros.com. For Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.